There's something about certain people that pulls you in. They don't dominate the conversation. They don't try to impress. They don't speak the most, yet somehow you remember them. That's not luck, that's magnetism. And magnetism in conversation isn't about charisma the way most people think. It's not about perfect words. It's not about confidence tricks. It's about how safe, seen, and understood people feel around you. Let's start with this truth. Presence beats performance every time. When you're fully present, people feel it. Your phone is away. Your attention isn't split. You're not planning your next sentence while they're talking. You're there. And that alone makes you magnetic because presence is rare. Next, understand this. Listening creates influence faster than speaking. Most people listen to reply. Magnetic people listen to understand. They don't rush in with advice. They don't hijack the story. They let the other person finish. And in doing that, they earn trust without asking for it. Another technique most people overlook is pace. Slow speech signals confidence. When you talk slowly, you tell the room you're not nervous, you're not scrambling. You're comfortable in your thoughts. Fast talking feels like pressure. Slow talking feels like control. And people lean toward control. Now let's talk about curiosity. Magnetic people ask thoughtful questions, not to sound smart, but to genuinely learn. They ask, how did that make you feel? What was that like for you? What made you decide that? Those questions do something powerful. They shift the focus from impressing to connecting. And connection is where magnetism lives. Another underrated skill is silence. Most people are uncomfortable with it. They rush to fill gaps. Magnetic people don't. They let silence breathe. They pause before responding. They allow space. Silence makes people feel heard. It also gives your words more weight when you finally speak. Now here's a big one. Validation is not agreement. You can say, I see why that mattered to you, without saying, I agree with everything you did. When people feel validated, their defenses drop. When defenses drop, connection deepens. That's emotional intelligence, and it's incredibly magnetic. And finally, remember this. People won't remember your exact words. They'll remember how they felt talking to you. Did they feel rushed, judged, talked over, or did they feel calm, respected, and understood? That feeling becomes your reputation. So if you want to be magnetic in conversation, stop trying to stand out. Be present. Be curious. Be calm. Be steady. Because the most magnetic people don't pull attention toward themselves, they make others feel important. And that's why everyone wants to be around them. Presence is more attractive than performance, even though most people are taught the opposite. From an early age, we're encouraged to impress, to say the right thing, to appear confident, capable, and interesting. Over time, conversation becomes a stage and people become performers, careful, choosing words, rehearsing responses, and monitoring reactions. But real attraction doesn't come from how polished you appear. It comes from how grounded you are. Presence isn't about doing more. It's about being fully here. When someone is present, you feel it immediately. There's a steadiness to them. Their attention isn't split between you and their phone, or between your words and their next response. They're not rushing to fill silence or prove something. They're listening, absorbing, and responding thoughtfully. That kind of attention feels rare and valuable in a world where distraction is constant. People are naturally drawn to what feels scarce, and genuine presence has become one of the rarest qualities there is. Performance, on the other hand, creates distance. When someone is trying too hard to be impressive, the focus shifts inward. Their energy turns toward managing perception rather than building connection. Even if the performance is polished, it often feels hollow. People can sense when they're being spoken at rather than spoken with. Presence dissolves that barrier. It shifts the focus outward, towards shared understanding rather than self-presentation. Presence also creates safety. When you're fully present with someone, they don't feel judged or evaluated. They feel accepted as they are. That safety allows people to open up, to speak honestly, and to relax into the conversation. Performance keeps people guarded. Presence lowers defenses. It's not flashy, but it's deeply disarming. People don't have to compete for attention or approval when they feel truly seen. Another reason presence is so attractive is because it signals confidence without arrogance. Confident people don't need to prove themselves. They don't rush, interrupt, or dominate conversation. They're comfortable with silence and uncertainty. That comfort communicates inner stability. Performance often comes from insecurity, from the need to control how others perceive you. Presence comes from self-trust, from knowing you don't need to perform to be worthy of attention. Presence also sharpens your communication. When you're not focused on performing, your words become clearer and more intentional. You respond instead of react. You ask better questions. You notice tone, timing, and emotional cues that performers miss. Conversations feel smoother, more natural, and more meaningful. People leave feeling understood rather than impressed, and understanding always lasts longer. There's also an emotional honesty that comes with presence. Performances tend to smooth over imperfections, but presence allows them to exist without shame. You don't hide uncertainty or emotion, you acknowledge it calmly. That authenticity builds trust. People are drawn to those who are real, not rehearsed. Presence invites genuine connection, while performance often invites comparison. In professional settings, presence is often mistaken for passivity, but it's anything but passive. Being present requires discipline, awareness, and restraint. It means resisting the urge to interrupt, dominate, or self-promote. It means allowing conversations to unfold naturally instead of forcing outcomes. This kind of leadership is subtle but powerful. People follow those who make them feel heard and valued, not those who constantly seek the spotlight. Presence also deepens relationships over time. Performances can be impressive in short bursts, but they're exhausting to maintain. Presence is sustainable. It doesn't require energy to keep up an image. It allows relationships to grow naturally, grounded in mutual respect rather than admiration. Over time, people trust presence more than performance because it's consistent and real. In a culture that rewards noise, speed, and visibility, presence can feel counterintuitive, but it's precisely because of that culture that presence stands out. When you slow down, listen fully, and show up without an agenda, you become magnetic without trying. People feel the difference, even if they can't explain it. Presence doesn't demand attention. It invites it, and that quiet invitation is far more powerful than any performance could ever be. Listening creates influence faster than speaking, even though most people believe influence comes from having the right words at the right time. We're taught to speak up, make our point, and assert ourselves, as if influence is something you push into a conversation. But real influence doesn't begin with expression. It begins with reception. The ability to truly listen communicates respect, intelligence, and confidence in ways that speaking alone never can. When you listen well, you signal that the other person matters. That signal lowers resistance almost immediately. People relax when they feel heard. They stop defending their position and start revealing their real thoughts. This shift happens quickly and often without conscious awareness. The moment someone feels understood, you gain access to their attention and trust is the foundation of influence. Without it, even the most persuasive words fall flat. Most people listen with the intention to respond. Their attention is divided between the speaker's words and their own internal commentary. They're waiting for a pause so they can jump in, correct, advise, or redirect. That kind of listening is transactional. It keeps conversations shallow and competitive. Genuine listening, on the other hand, is immersive. It requires patience and restraint. You allow the speaker to finish, even when you think you already know where they're going. That restraint communicates emotional maturity and self-control. Listening also gives you information that speaking cannot. When you listen closely, you learn how the other person thinks, what they care about, what they fear, and what motivates them. This information is invaluable. It allows you to tailor your response in a way that actually resonates. Influence comes not from speaking more, but from speaking with relevance. And relevance can only be discovered through listening. There's also a power dynamic at play. People who feel the need to dominate conversations often reveal insecurity. Those who listen calmly demonstrate confidence. They don't rush to assert themselves because they trust their voice will be heard when the time is right. This quiet confidence shifts the balance of influence. Others begin to seek your perspective because you've already proven that you understand theirs. Listening doesn't mean silence forever. It means timing your words for maximum impact. When you speak after listening, your words carry more weight. They feel considered rather than reactive. People are more receptive because they recognize that your response is grounded in understanding, not ego. This is how listening accelerates influence. You bypass resistance and move directly into connection. Listening also reduces conflict. Many disagreements escalate not because of opposing views, but because both sides feel unheard. When one person listens deeply, the emotional charge drops. The conversation becomes less about winning and more about resolving. That shift gives the listener a quiet leadership role. They guide the tone, the pace, and ultimately the outcome of the interaction. In leadership and professional environments, listening is often underestimated because it doesn't look like action. But it is one of the most strategic actions available. Leaders who listen well build loyalty faster. Teams trust them more. Decisions land better because people feel included in the process. Influence grows not through authority, but through inclusion. and inclusion begins with listening. Listening also strengthens your credibility. When people notice that you consistently understand situations before responding, they view you as thoughtful and wise. Your opinions carry more weight because they're grounded in context. Over time, people come to you not just for answers, but for an understanding. That is influence at its highest level. There is also an internal benefit to listening. It slows you down. It keeps you from reacting emotionally or defensively. Gives you space to choose your response rather than be driven by impulse. This self-regulation enhances your presence and your authority. You become someone who is not easily rattled. And that steadiness is persuasive. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the one who listens stands out, not because they are quieter, but because they are more effective. Listening creates influence faster than speaking because it builds trust before it asks for agreement. It opens doors that forceful words cannot. And once those doors are open, influence flows naturally, guided by understanding rather than effort. Slow speech signals confidence, even though many people believe the opposite. When nerves show up, the instinct is to talk faster, to get the words out before doubt catches up. Speed feels like safety. It feels like control. But in reality, rushing through your words does the opposite. It reveals anxiety, uncertainty, and a need for approval. Slow speech, on the other hand, communicates steadiness. It tells the room that you're comfortable with your thoughts and unafraid of silence. When someone speaks slowly, people listen differently. There's less noise in the exchange. Each word has room to land. Listeners don't feel pressured to keep up or fill gaps. Instead, they settle into the rhythm of the speaker. That rhythm matters. Humans naturally synchronize with calm, measured pacing. When you slow your speech, you subconsciously invite others to slow down too, creating a more grounded and focused conversation. Fast speech often comes from fear of interruption or judgment. It's an attempt to protect your idea by delivering it before someone cuts you off. Ironically, that rush makes interruptions more likely. When speech is rapid, it signals nervousness, and nervousness invites disruption. Slow speech does the opposite. It establishes presence. It creates a subtle boundary around your words, making them harder to ignore or override. Slow speech also demonstrates trust. It shows that you trust your listener to stay with you and that you trust yourself to hold their attention. That trust is a form of confidence. You're not scrambling to be understood. You're allowing understanding to unfold. People tend to respect speakers who don't beg for attention through speed or volume. Calm pacing suggests that what's being said is worth waiting for. Another reason slow speech signals confidence is because it reflects internal clarity. When your thoughts are organized, you don't need to rush. You know where you're going. You can take your time getting there. Even pauses become intentional rather than awkward. Those pauses give you space to think and give others space to process. Silence, when paired with slow speech, becomes a tool instead of a threat. Slow speech also improves credibility. Studies and everyday experience show that people perceive slower speakers as more thoughtful and authoritative. This doesn't mean dragging out every sentence, but it does mean speaking with intention. When words are delivered deliberately, they feel considered. That consideration builds trust. People are more likely to believe someone who sounds calm and measured than someone who sounds hurried or defensive. Emotionally, slow speech helps regulate both the speaker and the listener. Speaking slowly naturally deepens breathing, which calms the nervous system. That calmness is audible. It changes tone, inflection, and presence. Listeners feel it too. Tension decreases. Conversations become less reactive and more constructive. Confidence, at its core, is emotional regulation, and slow speech supports that regulation in real time. There's also a sense of self-respect communicated through slow speech. When you take your time, you signal that your words deserve attention. You're not apologizing for taking up space. You're not minimizing your presence. You're allowing yourself to be fully heard. That self-respect invites external respect. People tend to mirror the way you treat your own voice. In professional settings, slow speech can transform how you're perceived. Meetings become more productive. Ideas land more clearly. Others are less likely to interrupt or dismiss you. In personal conversations, slow speech creates intimacy. It feels thoughtful and sincere. It allows emotion to come through without being overwhelming. Learning to slow down can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to filling silence. But discomfort is often a sign of growth. As you practice, slow speech becomes natural. You begin to notice how much more control you have over conversations and how much more confident you feel. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're allowing yourself to move at a pace that matches your inner stability. Curiosity builds instant connection because it shifts the focus away from self-presentation and toward genuine understanding. When curiosity is present, conversations stop feeling like performances and start feeling like shared experiences. Instead of trying to impress, persuade, or dominate, curiosity invites exploration. It sends a clear message to the other person: you matter, and what you think is worth understanding. That message creates connection faster than any clever statement ever could. Most people enter conversations carrying an agenda, even if they don't realize it. They want to be liked, respected, or validated. That internal pressure often narrows their attention. They listen just enough to respond, but not enough to truly understand. Curiosity dissolves that pressure. When you become genuinely interested in someone else, the need to manage your image fades. You're no longer asking, "How do I sound?" You're asking, "What's really going on for them?" That shift is immediately felt. Curiosity also lowers defenses. People are naturally cautious in conversations, especially with new faces or in uncertain environments. They guard their thoughts, filter their words, and prepare for judgment. Curious questions soften that guard. When someone feels safe enough to explain, reflect, or explore their own thoughts out loud, trust forms quickly. They're not being evaluated, they're being invited. That invitation is powerful. Another reason curiosity builds connections so quickly is because it allows people to feel seen without being exposed. Curious questions aren't interrogations, they're gentle openings. Questions like, "What was that like for you?" or "What made that important?" give the other person control over how much they share. That sense of control increases comfort. People connect more easily when they feel respected rather than examined. Curiosity also communicates emotional intelligence. It shows that you're not rushing to conclusions or assumptions. You're willing to sit with complexity and uncertainty. That patience stands out. Many conversations feel rushed, shallow, or transactional. Curiosity slows things down just enough to create depth. It gives conversations texture. People remember those interactions because they felt different, more human. There's also a subtle humility in curiosity. It acknowledges that you don't already have all the answers. That humility is attractive. It creates balance. Conversations stop feeling like competitions and start feeling collaborative. Both people contribute, not to win but to understand. That shared purpose strengthens connection quickly and naturally. Curiosity doesn't mean agreement. You can be curious about perspectives you don't share. In fact, curiosity makes disagreement safer. When you ask questions to understand rather than to challenge, tension decreases. People feel less threatened and more open. This openness allows conversations to move forward instead of shutting down. Connection doesn't require alignment. It requires respect. Curiosity also enhances your presence. When you're truly curious, you're naturally attentive. You notice tone, pauses, and emotional cues. You respond thoughtfully rather than reflexively. That attentiveness makes people feel valued. Feeling valued is one of the strongest drivers of connection. It leaves a lasting impression, often stronger than any specific words exchanged. In professional settings, curiosity builds rapport faster than authority. Leaders who ask thoughtful questions earn trust more quickly than those who issue directives. In personal relationships, curiosity deepens intimacy. It keeps conversations alive and evolving. People feel comfortable sharing more because they know their experiences will be met with interest rather than judgment. Curiosity also enriches you. It expands your understanding of others and of yourself. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to learn rather than a task to complete. This mindset makes interactions more engaging and less exhausting. You're not carrying the burden of performance. You're simply exploring. Instant connection doesn't come from trying to be magnetic. It comes from making others feel interesting. Curiosity does that effortlessly. It turns ordinary conversations into meaningful exchanges and strangers into familiar presences. When you approach people with genuine curiosity, connection happens naturally with that force. Because being truly seen and heard is something everyone is drawn to. Silence gives your words power because it creates space for meaning to settle. In a world that rewards constant noise and rapid responses, silence feels uncomfortable, even risky. Many people rush to fill it, fearing that a pause will be interpreted as weakness, uncertainty, or lack of confidence. But the opposite is true. Silence, when used intentionally, amplifies what comes after it. It signals control, presence, and self-assurance in ways words alone cannot. When you speak without pause, your words compete with each other for attention. They blur together, and their impact weakens. Silence acts as a frame. It separates ideas, allowing each one to stand on its own. A brief pause before speaking draws attention. A pause after speaking allows the message to land. People need space to process, and silence provides that space. Without it, even the most important points can be overlooked. Silence also shifts the balance of a conversation. People who are comfortable with silence often guide the interaction without saying much at all. They don't rush to respond or react. That restraint communicates confidence. It shows that you're not dependent on constant affirmation or approval. Others begin to lean in, filling the silence with their own thoughts or questions. In that moment, you gain influence not by speaking more, but by allowing others to engage more deeply. There's a psychological effect at play as well. Silence creates anticipation. When you pause, listeners subconsciously prepare for what comes next. Their attention sharpens. When you finally speak, your words carry more weight because they arrive into a moment of focus. This is why effective communicators often pause before delivering key points. The silence signals importance before the words are even spoken. Silence also regulates emotion. In tense or emotionally charged conversations, words spoken too quickly can escalate conflict. Silence slows things down. It gives emotions time to settle and prevent reactive responses. Choosing silence in these moments isn't avoidance. It's strategic restraint. It allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively, which strengthens your credibility and authority. Another reason silence gives your words power is that it shows respect. When you allow silence, you give others room to think and respond. You're not rushing them or dominating the conversation. This respect is often returned. People are more willing to listen to someone who has demonstrated patience and consideration. Silence, in this way, becomes a form of listening. Many people fear silence because it exposes them. Without words to hide behind, presence becomes visible. But that visibility is what makes silence powerful. It reveals composure. It shows that you're grounded enough to sit with uncertainty. That kind of composure is rare and compelling. People instinctively trust those who are comfortable in silence because it suggests emotional stability. Silence also enhances authenticity. When you pause, you give yourself time to check in with what you actually want to say. This reduces filler words, over-explaining, and unnecessary justifications. Your speech becomes cleaner and more intentional. Each word carries purpose. That precision makes your message more convincing and memorable. In leadership and influence, silence is often underestimated because it doesn't look like action. But silence shapes outcomes quietly. It encourages reflection, invites participation, and creates space for insight. Leaders who use silence well are often perceived as thoughtful and wise, not because they speak less, but because when they do speak, their words matter. Silence also protects your energy. Constant talking can be draining, especially when it comes from anxiety or the need to control a situation. Silence allows you to conserve energy and maintain clarity. You're not reacting to every stimulus. You're choosing when to engage. That choice reinforces your authority. Using silence effectively takes practice. At first, pauses may feel awkward, but over time, they become natural. You start to notice how conversations shift when you stop rushing. People listen differently. They respond more thoughtfully. Your words carry more impact. Silence doesn't weaken your message. It strengthens it by giving it room to breathe, to be heard, and to be remembered. Validation is not agreement. Yet many people confuse the two and avoid validating others because they fear it means giving up their own position. In reality, validation is simply the acknowledgement of another person's experience, not an endorsement of their conclusions or actions. When you validate someone, you are saying, "I see you," or "I understand how that felt." Not "I think you're right." That distinction is critical for healthy communication and meaningful connection. People crave validation because it confirms their emotional reality. Being validated doesn't mean being proven correct. It means being recognized as human. When someone feels dismissed or misunderstood, their defenses rise. They stop listening and start protecting themselves. Validation lowers those defenses almost instantly. It creates a sense of safety that allows conversation to continue rather than collapse into conflict. This is why validation is such a powerful tool, especially in difficult or emotionally charged conversations. Many disagreements escalate not because of opposing views, but because one or both people feel unseen. When emotions are ignored, people speak louder, repeat themselves, or become more rigid in their stance. Validation interrupts that cycle. By acknowledging the emotion behind the words, you address the real issue instead of getting stuck in surface-level arguments. This doesn't weaken your position. It strengthens your ability to communicate it. Validation also demonstrates emotional intelligence. It shows that you can separate facts from feelings and hold space for someone else's experience without losing yourself. This ability requires confidence and self-control. Insecure communicators often rush to correct or defend because they feel threatened by differing perspectives. Secure communicators validate first because they know understanding does not equal surrender. When you validate without agreeing, you maintain clarity. You might say, "I can see why that upset you," while still holding a different opinion about what should be done next. That clarity keeps conversations grounded. It prevents misunderstandings and reduces the need for emotional escalation. People are more open to hearing your perspective once they feel theirs has been acknowledged. Validation also deepens trust. When someone knows they can express themselves without being dismissed or judged, they are more likely to be honest. That honesty improves communication quality and strengthens relationships. Over time, people learn that you are someone who listens thoughtfully rather than reacts defensively. This reputation makes future conversations easier and more productive. There is also a personal benefit to understanding that validation is not agreement. It frees you from the pressure to fix, convince, or resolve every conversation immediately. You can focus on connection first, knowing that solutions come more easily once emotions settle. This approach reduces stress and prevents unnecessary conflict, especially in situations where differences are inevitable. In leadership, validation builds loyalty. Team members who feel heard are more engaged and cooperative, even when decisions don't go their way. In personal relationships, validation fosters intimacy. It allows people to feel accepted even when they disagree. This balance of understanding and independence is what keeps relationships strong. Validation does not require elaborate language or long explanations. Simple acknowledgement is often enough. What matters is sincerity. When validation is genuine, it communicates respect. That respect becomes the foundation for influence, trust, and effective communication. Understanding that validation is not agreement allows you to stay true to your values while still honoring the experiences of others, creating conversations that are both honest and humane. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said, because emotions leave deeper imprints than words. Conversations fade, details blur, and exact phrases are forgotten, but the emotional experience lingers. Long after an interaction ends, people carry the feeling it created. That feeling shapes how they see you, how much they trust you, and whether they want to engage with you again. Words are processed intellectually, but feelings are stored emotionally. When someone feels respected, understood, or safe in your presence, that impression becomes part of their memory. They may not recall the advice you gave or the points you made, but they remember whether they felt heard or dismissed. Emotional memory works quietly, influencing future interactions without conscious effort. This is why tone often matters more than content. You can say the right thing in the wrong way and still damage a connection. Conversely, you can say very little but create a strong bond through warmth, patience, and attention. People read between the lines. They notice pauses, facial expressions, and energy. These signals shape the emotional atmosphere of a conversation more than any carefully chosen words. How you make people feel also determines how open they are with you. When someone feels judged or rushed, they close off. When they feel accepted and calm, they open up. This openness leads to better communication and stronger relationships. Emotional safety becomes the foundation for trust, and trust grows through consistent emotional experiences, not through clever language. Many people focus on saying impressive or persuasive things, believing that impact comes from intelligence or eloquence. But impact often comes from empathy. A simple acknowledgement, a calm presence, or a moment of patience can mean more than a perfect argument. People are drawn to those who make them feel comfortable being themselves. That comfort becomes memorable. Negative emotions are remembered just as strongly, sometimes even more so. A single dismissive comment or impatient tone can overshadow an otherwise positive interaction. This doesn't mean you must always agree or avoid honesty. It means that honesty delivered with respect leaves a different emotional mark than honesty delivered with frustration or superiority. The message may be the same, but the feeling is not. In leadership and influence, emotional memory plays a powerful role. People follow those who make them feel valued, not those who simply give orders. They remember who listened, who stayed calm under pressure, and who treated them with dignity. These emotional impressions guide loyalty and cooperation more than formal authority ever could. Understanding this truth also changes how you approach conversation. Instead of focusing solely on what to say, you become more aware of how you show up. Your presence, Patience and emotional regulation matter. You start to listen more fully and react less impulsively. This awareness improves not only how others experience you, but also how you experience yourself. Every interaction leaves a trace. Whether it's brief or deep, that trace is emotional. When you prioritize how people feel in your presence, your words naturally become more effective. They land with greater impact because they are carried by respect and care. In the end, it's not the sentences you construct that last, but the emotional experience you create.